Parasyte the Maxim, Episode 17, The Adventures of the Dying Detective. Now, this is a very interesting episode. I actually watched this one in Japanese again. Actually, before I start the review, I don't know if you guys knew this, but the words in the actual opening are English. At least some of them. I think in the Toonami opening, it cuts like straight to the Japanese portion. But the beginning of that song is actually sung in English, even though you probably couldn't tell because, of course, it's sung by a Japanese person and it clearly doesn't speak like fluent English. He didn't learn it growing up. You could tell, obviously based on the accent. But that really surprised me. That reminded me of this one song. There's a season in Bleach where the whole opening is done in English, and I had no idea until I actually saw like a random video where they had the subtitles on it, and it was all just English words. I was like, oh, he's actually speaking English. I always thought that was Japanese because I could not tell based on the way it was sung. So, random little thing, if you've heard the full opening, that first part is sung in English, if you didn't happen to see subtitles like I did. But that really surprised me. That was kind of funny. And I knew that before, but I don't think I mentioned it in the last episode I ended up having to watch on Hulu. But this was a good episode. I like this one a lot because we got a really cool fight with Tamara against those other three parasites, and that was pretty crazy. I didn't expect that to go that way. And it was just interesting. Like, she's like, alright. Yeah, at first I thought she was gonna be like, that's fine that you guys are gonna kill me. Like, it just makes me happy that we're starting to, have individuality. And then she was like, did you think that just 3 of you could kill me? And I was like, oh, that changed. That's not what I thought was about to happen. And then she takes off into the construction yard, and they have just a crazy fight. And, the one guy's like, my muscle control is better than yours or whatever. And he chops her up and is like, see, you're too slow. And then that piece just drops and spirals into his spine. And I was like, what the heck is happening right now? And then she took off and was like, you can keep that. And she takes off. And it was just crazy after that because she's running down the street with half a head, and those 2 people who were clearly stupid freaked out. And I say they're stupid because they actually followed her. But, they freak out, and she's just running. And honestly, when it first happened, I thought it was the other girl that was there because I'm like, why would she be running down the street, laughing like that? But then it did dawn on me like, oh yeah, she would be basically stupider, simply put, because she split herself up. And, she actually did lose like the top half of her head. So she's just running down like, ha ha ha, and they freak out. And they find her and she changed her face. I think they show like a poster that she ran past or something like that, and she changed her face to that one. And so I knew she wasn't going to kill them because she's, of course, like really trying to blend in, and I could tell she wasn't about to. And then they're like, the woman was missing like half her head, but clearly, it's not you. And she's like, oh, half a head, but my head's empty. And she just rips her head open, which is probably oddly enough, I don't know how this happens, but for whatever reason, that was one of the grossest things I've seen in the show because it just looked so weird. Because she was like using her hair. It wasn't like her head just split open. But it was like she just ripped her head and she's just like, see? And she's just like pulling it. And I was like, that, for whatever reason, looks really gross to me compared to all the other craziness I've seen. Her just like grabbing strands of her hair and just going like, see? And her head just peels open and it's actually empty on the inside. So that did look weird to me too. It was like, that's really weird. Like, that just seemed super creepy and gross to me compared to all of the insanity I've seen before. That just looked gross to me. But it was definitely interesting. Then the other guy's following behind her, because he hears, the other people scream. And he's like, she's freaking lost it. Like, she split herself up. And now, Reiko Tamara, who's known as, like, the intelligent one and doing all these experiments and stuff, is this the way she's going to end? Where she's just, like, running around crazy, like, ha ha ha, just screaming in the streets with half a head. So then he realizes that one of his people died because she basically pulled like an alien chest burster on the first parasite, which I knew she would because it dug into him. And at first I thought she was going to try to take over his system and try to like, kind of force him into submission, and she'd have complete control over 2 separate entities. But she kind of does do that because she does control his legs and he can't control himself. So he ends up pinning down the other woman that was there. And then she does do like the alien chest burster thing, and she like blows his stomach open and it kills him. And then she dives into the other woman and controls her. And that woman specifically mentioned, because the guy said like, oh, I can't control my legs, and maybe it's partly because of what he mentioned about having such great control over his muscles and his system. But for her, she was like, I can't control anything below my neck. So, Reiko had like complete control over her body, and she's going towards the guy, and he chops her up and stuff. And she mentions after she takes him down, like, oh, basically you just put a bunch of angry body parts all over the place, so it completely hid me coming back, here. So that was just a crazy scene. Like, she did a great job in that. That was a cunning and awesome fight scene. And also the music. And I believe I mentioned this before. I don't know if I forgot to mention it or what. But the music they play in this sometimes is like, it's like some techno style music. And when they did that, I was like, oh, they brought that music back. Because it was like weird music that didn't seem to fit like an actual fight scene. Because it was almost like techno music. But it did fit for sure. I think I mentioned it before because they almost did like a 70s style thing that was almost like a really old cheesy blaxploitation style music. And I think I mentioned that before from some other episode. I can't remember which one, but they brought that back. Like the weird, like it fit, but it was also off-putting because normally you just expect to hear certain instruments or certain, just certain styles is what you expect. But it was clearly like based off of like techno music, but it still fit the scene for sure. It's just like, it's just unique. So I like that, and it's hard not to notice when it's basically like techno music coming into play. So they did that during the fight, and I believe they did it towards the end when they were at the park when Reiko was talking to the detective. But it was fun. I liked that fight for sure. It was very awesome of her character because I thought, when it first happened, I was like, okay, so she got a piece of her chopped off. Like she's gonna. I figured she'd find a way to still survive that because she's clearly such an important character. But I didn't think it would be the way that it was because she was just like, it was basically her plan the whole time was to split off after she got chopped up. And I like that. And it was super cool the way she did it too because she was like, oh, you can have that. And after it like spirals into his back, she's like, oh, you can have that. And she just walks out. Like they kind of just let her go if I remember right. She kind of just took off. And then she got the rocks in her purse because she knew, what she was going to do when she chopped the guy's head off. And he jumped at her and she just hits him with the bag of rocks. And everything works out. She killed, all three of them get killed off and she's totally fine. And it was just a cool little scene. Then she goes home and the detective has kidnapped the little, the baby girl. And I was like, he is trying to die now. And of course, that's what ends up happening by the end of this episode. But it was just a crazy one. And Reiko gets Shinichi to go to this park and try to meet them because she knows she's going to get the baby. And I'm assuming, because what she said was, I believe she was like, I want you to see something. So it technically could have been different in the English version. But I believe it was like, I want you to see something or I have something for you because you're in between Parasyte and human. So I don't know if her plan is to just give him the baby and see what happens from there or what her deal is, but it kind of sounded like that was her idea. It was like, oh, I have something for you, and she's going to give him the baby to protect or just as another experiment, just to see how they both interact with each other because this baby's kind of in between as well, which we've clearly seen because of the whole stuff where she can just tell the baby, stop crying or be quiet, and it will. So there's clearly something there, and obviously Shinichi and Migi are kind of a part of that as well. Somewhat in that same category, at least. So it seems like that's what her plan is to give him the baby just to see what happens. But it was pretty nuts. And so, she's at his house and I guess just getting more into the idea of being human and being a mother because she's going through the pictures of Shinichi as a little baby. And, we see all these pictures and stuff and she calls him from his house and everything. And it's like, I'm not here to kill anyone. I don't have time for that or something. She didn't really give a crap. She couldn't have cared less. And so their plan, she goes to the park. She knows she has to meet this guy. I'm assuming her plan the entire time was probably to kill him. But she didn't do that until the last minute to save the baby. And, he mentioned that it was a joke to her. But when he was dying, he said, like, I'm really glad I didn't kill the baby. So I'm guessing it wasn't a joke. Like, he was really going to do that to see if, she could have some form of loss or something like that. But He was different crazy. I did like the note though. I don't know what they put on Toonami, but it was really funny watching it, and it was like come to the park and everything. It was like signed Detective Sherlock Holmes. I really loved that because I thought that was just really funny. But it sucked to see the guy go. Although I figured he was gonna die. I think I said that from the very beginning. I was like, he's gonna get himself killed. He knows about parasites. He's gonna die, and that's pretty much exactly what happened. He looked very different too, as far as animation goes. He looked different to me as far as his face, and I think it was like his hairstyle was technically different, but he was kind of like actually dressed up a little bit, and I guess because he kind of knew what he was planning on doing, so they kind of did it where he was like dressed up in the jacket and everything, so he looked a little different. But I like that scene, and Reiko like stabs him in the back, and he falls over and he dies. She catches the baby and she kind of takes off, and then the cops show up, and they ask him about Shinichi, like they ask him about who his partner was, and I was wondering if he was gonna say it because, so that's a big deal, and I was like, is he gonna end up telling them that it's Shinichi, or is he gonna leave him out of it and kind of let him just live his life and figure stuff out? And ultimately, he does let him go, and he doesn't say Shinichi, but I feel like they're gonna find out soon. They may or may not find out in the very next episode. Like, I'm not sure about that, but I doubt there are too many women wearing white with babies, but they did have that first woman crying, which I thought was a funny scene. And it's just like, who are you? What's your name and stuff? And she's freaked out because like 3 cops just pull guns on her, and it's just like, who the f are you and stuff. So I thought that was actually kind of funny because of course she's gonna end up being fine. They aren't just gonna like unload on her. But I thought that was really funny because they got the wrong woman, and it was just like, what's your name and stuff like that. So that was pretty funny to me. But it ultimately comes together in the end with Shinichi and Reiko together, and there's this baby, and I don't know if that's really her plan or what's gonna happen, but it's gonna be pretty weird. And then we have, of course, the other story that kind of takes place in this episode is all about Murano, and that is her getting closer to the truth because she sees Reiko coming out of Shinichi's house, but she never met his mother, so she just assumed that was her. And it's like, and that was another good scene for Reiko because she mentioned like, oh, he'll come back and he'll be perfectly fine. And I was like, that's a very interesting thing for her to say about this guy. So it was an interesting moment for her, but Murano sees Shinichi on the bus, so she takes off after the bus. Then she sees Reiko, and then of course Reiko takes off from her, and like she had just a lot of moments in this episode, and it was like she's being interesting for a parasite because she could have easily killed Murano during that scene if she wanted to, but it's like I don't want to cause any trouble, so she just took off running. And it was a funny scene too because as soon as she saw it, she was like, oh, and just like kind of slid through the people and took off. But I like that because it just showed how she's changing a lot. Because she could have easily just wiped her out and been like, all right, she's out of my way. And Shinichi probably wouldn't have known. He would have been none the wiser for quite a while because he's kind of on the run because he's worried about staying at home because it's an easy way for him to get attacked. But I don't know. I feel like she might survive. I would hope that she survived. But she does mention kind of in this episode, she was because she was in like Kana's hometown, I guess, or her district. But I don't know. Like she's falling after them. I don't know if she's in the same park. I would assume so. But she was just in like some random park, so I don't think she's anywhere actually near them. She kind of just gave up, and it was just some random spot. But if she's does happen to be near them, and even if not, if she finds Shinichi and he's with this baby, he does have the baby, then I don't know. Things are gonna be pretty weird. And she didn't recognize Reiko as the former teacher because she does. I didn't really think about this until she said it, but I noticed before like she did change her appearance because I believe her hair was like light purple when she first showed up, and her face was definitely different. And like I think her face was different in a pretty big way. Like it's enough to be recognizable. I think it's like her eyes might be the same, but I think the rest of her face is a bit different. I think she had like a pointier chin when she kind of was first revealed, but like she has much darker hair because she had more typical anime style hair where it was like purple, which just doesn't happen naturally. So she had like purple hair before, but now she kind of has like bluish, blackish type hair. So it's kind of interesting when Myrtle was like, she seems pretty familiar, but of course she changed so much about her that it's still there, but of course not recognizable. And there was the moment when Reiko was talking with the detective, when her eyes, you could kind of see, because they didn't like zoom in on it, but they had like those sparks and stuff in her eyes. And then Migi was like, I've never felt this emotion before from one of my own kind. So I wondered what emotion it was. I was like, is it anger? Is it fear? Like, I thought it might be fear, or maybe it could be love or something like that. There are a lot of possibilities just based on that situation and what she was kind of researching earlier, like going through the pictures and stuff. It could be love, which I think might be a bit of a stretch, but I think fear is much easier to get to than love is, because she wants these experiments. That's kind of her thing now, is like, let's see what happens with this, and let's try to figure out, like she mentioned to the one parasite, where do we come from and where are we going? So she is kind of getting into the mindset of humans, like the ultimate questions and stuff like that. So I think, like I said, I think love is a bit of a stretch. It's the emotion that she might have felt, but I think fear is definitely something that could easily have shown up. Like, she would lose this child, she would have lost a nearly limitless, aspect, or asset, I should say, not aspect, but nearly limitless asset to what parasites are and what they can become. So I feel like that's what it might have been. It could be something else. It could be love. It could have simply been anger, but I don't know. Well, I don't know. I feel like fear was probably the number one there. Either fear or possibly anger, but she didn't, her face didn't change or anything to show anger, but we've seen her laugh before, and she was clearly doing it in this episode, just like crazy laughing. But I think it might have been fear in this one. That's my pick. Of course, I want to know yours, but that was kind of my thing. I was like, I think love would be a bit of a stretch, just from, zero to love, just in that one moment, because the baby could die. But it could be. I mean, all that research she's been doing, how she has been changing, it could have, it could have finally, culminated in this moment to be love. So we'll just have to wait and see. Which they probably won't give us the official answer in the next episode, but we'll just have to wait and see. But this was a good episode. I hope Myrtle doesn't die as well. I really hope she doesn't. But anyone who gets close will, most likely. So I have to see what happens. But I certainly enjoyed this episode. Definitely want to know what you guys thought about it. So please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts or least favorite parts. And with the cops being in this park, with Reiko having the baby and Shinichi and Migi being there, what do you think is going to come of that? Because I do think that Reiko's plan is to give the baby to Shinichi just to see what would take place. And that may or may not change based on, what happened in this episode. But I still feel like that's her plan. And I'm still pretty sure that the cops will end up finding them. And they might find her, or they might just find Shinichi. And like I said, I don't know how they're going to do things with the baby, if that was her plan, or that's just, how it seemed to me. But I'm still looking forward to it either way. But I want to know your speculations, and of course what you guys thought about this episode in general. So please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.